Hi, we're going to start our sew along using the Sew Simple Simplicity pattern A1738, and I bought mine at Walmart for 97 cents. We're going to make some alterations to this jacket though, because the group found another jacket in a picture that had a circle detail like a peplum coming down in the back. And we're going to start that at the waist, and we'll be coming in at an angle here. So we will not be using this section here. We're going to alter that piece right out. And this is where the bottom peplum part will connect in at to the front. So the rest of the jacket we're going to do the same as the pattern is stated, except we're not going to add this little back piece right here, because with the circle part in the back, that's just going to look too busy. So we will be leaving that out for this tutorial, sew along. And you'll need to start by cutting out your pattern pieces. And I usually do not cut the pieces out completely. I leave extra paper on it, and then I trace off to the side, because sometimes I want to use these patterns to make other sizes for other people. And so that just makes it easier than buying a bunch of different patterns and just cutting them all up. Now, you really need to take your measurements, because you cannot buy a pattern and sew it to your size that you get for off the rack. And on the back of your pattern, it will have your size, and then it will have the measurements. So in this particular instance, it's going to go off of your bust measurement and your back, neck to waist measurement. Those are the only two measurements that we're going to use on this pattern for the sizes. And it says you're going to need the fabric here from 2 yards up to 2 1/4 yards for these sizes given. But remember, we're adding an extra piece. We're adding that back circle part. So you're probably going to need up to an extra 2 yards of fabric. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So take your measurements, and the pattern has this little piece of paper. So if you're not familiar with patterns, just try to follow your sizes that it says here. Find your bust measurement, then find your waist and your hip measurement, and you can mark that off. And if you need to change the size a little bit on your pattern to make it fit, this would be the time to do it before we cut into the fabric. So once you have your pattern cut out and everything marked as you need to be, go ahead and prepare your fabric, and we're going to go on to the next part. Hi, we're going to work on the next phase of our jacket from Sew Simple, and we're going to talk about now our pattern guide and the construction and the layout of our fabric and our pattern. This pattern guide is going to show us the construction of the jacket step by step, and for those that are more experienced, you might not need this information, but I do these tutorials on request, and there's a lot of beginners in our group. So I'm going to try and be really thorough, and I might give some information that you already know. So you just feel free to forward on through this if you want to. Here we have the pieces of our pattern, and they're marked right here as to identify the number and what that pattern piece will be on the constructed garment. Then we're going to move over to the cutting layout. And this shows our fabric is folded in half, and this is the selvage edge right here, and this will be the fold. So the selvage edge is the edge of our fabric that has that little finished edge on it, or sometimes it has the little open holes along the edge. That's the selvage edge. So we'll want to have both of those finished edges together and the fold right here. Now there's only one pattern piece that actually needs to be cut on the fold, because we're not working with this number 4, remember? So this number 3 is showing that it is cut on the fold, and here is that piece right here. And we did another video earlier talking about cutting on the fold, and how these patterns have this little arrow with this line, and another little arrow usually, and that indicates to cut on the fold at this line right here. And it will say center fold, place on center fold, so you need to read your pattern to make sure where you need to cut. It also says up here on the identifying information of the pattern that it's the back piece and to cut 1 on the fold. So that's exactly what we're going to do. This piece of fabric we will lay so this line matches up with the fold of our fabric. And then we're going to secure it with our pins or our pattern weights, and then we will carefully cut around it. And when we open it, it'll be a complete back because this is half of a back. So my example of a heart, when you cut a heart, if you just cut a plain heart, you're just going to have a half of a heart. If you cut a heart on a fold of paper, when you open it up, then you have a complete heart shape. So that's along with those pattern pieces that are on the fold. It's only half of a piece, and you have to cut it on the fold to get your entire piece, both sides of that piece. Now the other thing we're going to look at is right here, our pattern piece number 1, which is the front and the collar as marked on our patterns. It shows that 2 times on our pattern guide here. So what we're going to do with that is the first time it shows, it is regular side up. So we will lay it on the pattern with the printed side of the pattern up, and we will cut around it. Now this says cut 4, but what we really need to do is cut 2 with the pattern having the printed up. And then when we look at our pattern guide again, we see the other piece of it is shaded gray. And that tells us that we need to reverse the pattern and put it printed side down and then cut the remaining 2 pieces. Now if you get confused, there's a little guide right here, and it tells us if it's gray to put the pattern printed side down. If it's white, pattern printed side up. So that will help us remember when we're looking at this little guide. And you can see that the back piece that we talked about that's cut on the fold, they're also telling us to put that printed side down when we cut on the fold. So we're cutting number 3 on the fold, printed side down, and then our number 1 piece we're going to cut 2 times with the printing up, and then we're going to cut another 2 times with the printing down. So now I'm going to fold some fabric, and I'm going to show you what these little lines mean in regards to lining up our pattern onto our fabric, okay? So here we're going to talk about our pattern being on our fabric and lining up with that grain line, which is what this line right here indicates, that this pattern needs to run with the grain of the fabric. Now when we're working with stretch fabric, it is super important to make sure that the stretch of our fabric is going the right way, which will be around our body. If you're using 4-way stretch, it doesn't really matter so much. But with a 2-way stretch, you have to make sure the stretch is going the correct way. Otherwise, your garment is not going to fit. So these little arrows say with the grain of our fabric. And the way that we figure this out, that they're lined up straight, is we're going to measure. We're going to put our measuring tape on this little line, and we're going to measure to the end. And this is kind of a bad example with the fabric I'm using because the edges curl, but we're just going to pretend that these edges are not curled. So we're going to measure here, and it says about 5 inches. So then I'm going to want to put a pin or a pattern weight, and I'm going to move up, and I need to make sure this says 5 inches, and it doesn't. So I'm going to adjust this over just a little bit, and then I'm going to measure again, and when it says 5 inches, then I'm good. So the entire pattern we're going to lay out in this way, and we might be measuring from more over on our pattern and our fabric as we lay out. We might measure from over here where we have our next pattern piece at to the edge to get our grain line. But we're going to do it in the same way that we just did this first piece. We're going to measure from one part of the line on the arrow to the edge, and then we're going to go up and we're going to make sure that the placement is the same and measure from one line of the arrow to the edge of the fabric. So now you have your fabric layout, and you know how to put your fabric on the grain for your patterns, and I'm going to let you cut out your pattern pieces. If you have any questions, please message me in the group or message me on YouTube. I prefer that you message me in the group because I see that a little bit sooner. So again, we're going to continue working with our pattern, and the next video will be the construction and the sewing of our pattern pieces, and we're going to work on adding that skirt detail. See you soon.